regards to commissioning, there's two types of underfloor heating systems. One is water fed, and this is typically known as heated screeds, and also under tile heating, which is secondary. With regards to commissioning, if you're talking about heated screeds themselves, so water fed systems, first of all the screed needs to be at least dry. Now that could be typically a minimum of 3 weeks, but obviously following the guidelines of the manufacturer. Secondly is also when you come to commission, you need to actually turn that up by 5 degrees to a maximum of 45 degrees Celsius and let that run for at least 3 days. But again, following guidelines, and then obviously switching that off at least 48 hours before tiling commences. Now, if you're in colder conditions, the heating can actually be turned down to 15 degrees Celsius. And then the tiling element commences. Once you've done the tiling and including the grouting and finishing products such as sealants, with underfloor heating, any underfloor heating, you must leave it for a further 2 weeks before you actually commission it again. And then following guidelines, again it could be 5 degrees per day or following the manufacturer's instructions. And this also applies with secondary underfloor heating. This is heated mats. You don't commission beforehand, but again you should leave it 2 weeks before switching it on. Why do you prime? Always a good question. Generally speaking, with a lot of fixers, and including myself, before obviously I've worked about, is if you're never unsure, you always prime the surface. And in most cases that's actually true, but it's important on dilution rates with regards to products, and how much you put on is also an important part. But why do we prime? Priming itself obviously reduces the porosity. What that means is basically is that when you use an adhesive onto a background or a substrate, what you sometimes don't want to happen is the water, in particular with cement-based adhesives, absorbing into the background too quickly. So you're actually just keeping the water in the product to help for it to set and obviously build its strength up. With regards to dilution rates, we've got products like Balprime APD. This is actually a colour primer, so it also helps to ensure that you cover the entire area. It's also fast drying, which obviously is important for us anyway, as fixers. But dilution rates, it will actually be applied neat for most applications, such as going on to timber, particularly tongue and groove, and also when you get onto plaster before using a cementitious adhesive to stop things like etronite. Again, number of coats is obviously important as well, and generally with those two substrates you would always apply 2 coats. But always use the guidelines on our booklets with regards to priming anyway. Also with regards to dilutions of 1:1, that's normally used onto screeds or renders where you want to just take some of that absorbency out of the background. It's also useful to use onto things like cement boards to reduce the porosity again, so the adhesive is not taken up into the background too quickly, and including bell board, so 1:1 dilution with clean cold water. When you come to apply these primers, important also to note is it can be obviously brushed or rolled or using a swing brush, but on bases such as floors it's always best practice never to put too much on so you get pooling. Always ensure that you have an even coat across the entire area. If you're doing more than 1 coat, always allow the first coat to dry first. Why do we use admixtures? Well, in cases there's still a need for an admix. Not as much as it was 20, 30 years ago for some of you that remember, but there's still cases such as going on to backgrounds such as existing glazed tiles, and that would be a requirement to improve the bond strength. The adhesives within the BAL range, even though they're highly polymer modified, are not able to go directly into glazed fitted surfaces. So we would recommend the Admix AD1, AD stands for adhesive, and that actually can be modified to a number of BAL products within the range. Certainly within the highly polymer modified category, you only now need a 1:3 ratio by volume. So 1 part admix to 3 parts water. So you're only using this very small amount. That will increase the bond strength and allow then the adhesive to stick to an impervious surface. Other cases where an admix would be used is really on a case-by-case basis, such as certain specifications due to the environments. It can also be useful to be used externally in some cases to reduce the water and allow water not absorbing through the background as quickly, so it does give some protection. And thirdly, when you're fixing things like glomerates, so we talk about resin type of tiles, we would be in cases where we're fixing those type of materials, they are very susceptible to water. So by modifying with an element of the Admix AD1 into the adhesive, you're actually putting less water and therefore less chance of the glomerates actually curling and potentially coming away. So again, there's still a need for them, but in most cases, the highly polymodified adhesive can be used on a day-to-day sort of basis. Thank you for listening today on today's Q&A. If you have any questions, please feel free to obviously drop them on the comments box below, and we will be back again shortly to answer those ones as well. Thank you very much.